please rise for the procession. From the Rector's Chamber, I would like to welcome you to the 76th opening of the academic year. Above me, you see the motto of former castle owner Michael Onnes, Cedo Nulli, which means I yield to no one. This text is also engraved in the entrance gate on the bridge to the castle. This office was used on daily basis until 2008. Now it's mostly used for formal meetings, official signings or recordings. May I have your attention for our first speaker, Professor Koen Becking, Rector Magnificus of Nyenrode Business University.
Dear students, faculty, staff, alumni and friends of Nyenrode. Dear former Nyenrode board members, dear members of the foundation board, dear mayor of Stichtsvecht, dear Constantijn van Oranje. Your Excellency, the Ambassador of Ukraine, Mr. Kononenko, a special welcome to you. Much appreciated that you are here with us today, knowing that your country is at war and that 37 of your people have found temporary housing here on our estate since the very beginning. A very warm welcome to you all at the opening of the ceremony of the upcoming academic year. I'm very happy to see you all here and share the start of the great new year. It's great to welcome you both here at the Pfizer Auditorium and remotely. For this year's opening of the academic year, we have chosen to shake things up a bit and change the format you're used to. Instead of only one keynote speaker, we have multiple speakers for you in this year's lineup, both live here with us and remotely. As the special theme for this year's event, we have opted for responsible entrepreneurship in the next 75 years. And of course, the theme reference was not picked randomly. We have a full program for you today. As I already mentioned, this afternoon will be about responsible entrepreneurship in the next 75 years. And the program includes the following elements. In a few moments, Sharon Dijksma, the mayor of Utrecht, will address how a vision on entrepreneurship can contribute to a long-lasting development of our region. Family-owned businesses are an important pillar of the Dutch economy. Professors Roberto Flören and Marta Berent-Braun will enlighten you about their research and the sustainable development of family-owned businesses. Alum Andy Bender is the chair of the Netherlands America Foundation. From his experiences in the field, he will tell us about entrepreneurship in the American healthcare system. And he will share his vision on how Nyenrode will be able to contribute to the future of entrepreneurship. Constantijn van Oranje will be interviewed by Jessica Peters Hondelink and explore why the startup community is essential to solving societal and ecological challenges of our time, and the importance of diversity in the success of startups. One of the ways Nyenrode wants to contribute to responsible entrepreneurship in the future is by creating promising startups. Together with the Dutch Startup Association and several other partners, we have set up an exciting, groundbreaking program. With this program, we want to help build at least 50 startups in the next 5 years. CEO of the Dutch Startup Association, Lucien Burm, will tell you more about this initiative later. And we will meet some young entrepreneurs as well. Lastly, this year's opening of the academic year will be concluded by Petri Hofsté, chair of the foundation board. I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of today's speakers. Last academic year was a very special year in which we celebrated our 75th anniversary through a combination of intellectual and fun activities. We looked back on our history and showed where we stand in the here and now. And we didn't just look back, we also looked to the future of Nyenrode and the direction we want to be heading in. Let's look together at this wonderful short video that shows the highlights of last year's activities celebrating our anniversary. I bid you a warm welcome at the opening ceremony of the 75th year that Nyenrode Business University fulfills its purpose.
We're going to talk about sustainability and what brings us together.
Welkom op Nyenrode haar 75ste verjaardag. We laten ons vanmiddag inspireren en sluiten af met een geweldig feest.
Based on today's theme, we want to take a closer look at how we as Nyenrode continue to lead in shaping responsible leaders for the 75 years to come. We are ambitious and have been working relentlessly to translate our strategy into a dashboard with concrete, clear objectives. One of the objectives is becoming one of the business schools belonging to the 1% best business schools worldwide that have Triple Crown accreditation. And to be able to create more impact, we want to promote ourselves more clearly as an international business university, highly ranked in Europe. And a more international approach means offering an inclusive and diverse environment, where everyone feels at home in Breukelen, Amsterdam, or The Hague. As one of the first bold steps in this direction, we signed the SER Diversity Charter last spring, and we launched the Nyenrode Scholarship Fund, soon to be followed by our Research Fund and a Heritage Fund. Our purpose, serving society by shaping responsible leaders, remains our starting point. From the very beginning, we were involved in serving society by contributing to the reconstruction of our country. But how do we serve society in the present time with problems of unprecedented magnitude and such a strong polarization? We are facing huge issues on a global level, issues that are so complex that we call them wicked problems. 75 years ago, there was a need for go-getters to help rebuild the Netherlands after the Second World War and put our country back on the map economically. Nowadays, society needs leaders and organizations who know how to give substance to a sustainable transformation. This is an urgent task, so we need to raise bold leaders who do the right thing now more than ever. A transformation towards an economy that benefits us all. An economy balancing social, natural, and intellectual capital. An economy in which leaders make responsible choices, combining profits with positive societal and environmental impact. Nyenrode is the only private university in the Netherlands, and the place where these responsible leaders, that the world desperately needs, learn how to make an impact for the generations to come. And where they learn how they can transform businesses and public institutions to be future-proof, so that we can transition towards a regenerative, positive economy. But as Nyenrode, we are not only an educator, we are also a business. And that is exactly why we have to look at ourselves closely and dare taking the lead with our own business approach. To conclude, as Nyenrode, we can look back on 75 wonderful years. And I foresee an equally bright future ahead of us. A future in which we continue to inspire and challenge leaders and organizations. And that is why I dare say, at Nyenrode, you are at the right place for taking on responsible entrepreneurship in the next 75 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Becking. I'm standing in the largest bicycle parking of the world at Utrecht Central Station. Every day, 12,500 cyclists can park their bicycle here. While I'm looking for my bike in the bicycle parking, you are going to listen to Miss Sharon Dijksma, Mayor of the City of Utrecht and Chair of the Economic Board Utrecht. Please, a warm welcome for Miss Dijksma.
Weten jullie nog wat jullie deden op dinsdag 12 juli? Ik wel. Ik zat die dag met open mond te kijken naar de eerste beelden die de James Webb ruimtetelescoop naar de aarde stuurde. Wat we zagen was fantastisch en ongelooflijk tegelijk. Nog niet eerder keken we zo diep in het heelal en konden we zo ver terug in de tijd. 13 miljard jaar maar liefst. Deze beelden bewijzen andermaal hoe nietig wij zijn tussen al die sterrenstelsels. Sterrenstelsels die misschien ook planeten met leven bevatten. Voorlopig weten we één ding echt zeker. En dat is dat er maar één planeet is, zoals de onze. Een planeet waar het nu niet goed mee gaat, die ziek is. En het is onze verantwoordelijkheid daar beter voor te zorgen. Wellicht vragen jullie je af waarom ik een nieuw academisch jaar op Nyenrode begin met de toekomst van onze planeet. Omdat ik jullie op dag 1 van een nieuw academisch jaar meteen wil uitdagen, ik zeg het maar. Want studenten, ook jullie zijn onze toekomst. En misschien komen jullie op een dag wel met nieuwe ideeën, nieuwe kansen en nieuwe oplossingen. Oplossingen om van planeet Aarde een betere plek te maken. Oplossingen die niet alleen van de wetenschappers moeten komen, maar ook bijvoorbeeld van ondernemers die zich verantwoordelijk voelen voor onze toekomst. Een gezonde toekomst met een gezonde leefomgeving. en gezonde mensen. Misschien komen die oplossingen straks dus wel van jullie. Jullie studeren op vruchtbare grond, want met jullie keuze voor Nyenrode University kiezen jullie ook voor de metropoolregio Utrecht. De nummer 2 competitiefste regio van de Europese Unie. Maar jullie begrijpen dat wij dat nog niet genoeg vinden. Nee, wij gaan voor goud. En dat doen we met een ambitieuze missie. De gezondste regio ter wereld worden. The beating heart of a healthy society word je niet zomaar. Maar gelukkig ligt de infrastructuur er grotendeels al. 2 universiteiten, waaronder Nyenrode. Topziekenhuizen. Gerenommeerde onderzoeksinstituten. Innovatieve bedrijven en natuurlijk heel veel vakmensen. Onderzoekers, ambtenaren en ondernemers. Ondernemers zijn een belangrijke schakel, want zij zorgen voor de verandering. Zij jagen de vernieuwing aan en ze zijn toekomstgericht bezig. En het is echt mooi dat we dankzij de James Webb ruimtetelescoop 13 miljard jaar terug in de tijd kunnen kijken. Maar we moeten natuurlijk ook vooruitkijken. En als ik kijk naar de metropoolregio Utrecht, dan zie ik heel veel mensen die al met morgen bezig zijn. Werken aan slimme oplossingen die bijdragen aan een bedrijvige en een gezonde toekomst. In de stad Utrecht staat bijvoorbeeld de grootste bidirectionele parkeergarage ter wereld. In onze regio wordt volop geëxperimenteerd met gepersonaliseerde zorg, waarbij de menselijke cellen in een 3D-printer worden gestopt en bijvoorbeeld nieuw kraakbeen kan worden geprint. En we zijn al heel ver met een soort van videogame waarmee je precies kan voorspellen welke effecten bouwprojecten en het verduurzamen van de leefomgeving kunnen hebben. Zodat je eigenlijk de allerbeste keuzes kan maken voor je leefomgeving. Het zijn maar een paar mooie innovaties die in de regio Utrecht worden ontwikkeld. En waar in de toekomst niet alleen de 1,5 miljoen inwoners van onze regio, ook jullie dus, maar de hele wereld van kan mee profiteren. En misschien zijn jullie vandaag nog niet helemaal met de toekomst bezig, maar responsible entrepreneurship begint niet pas als je gaat werken. Verantwoordelijk ondernemen, dat kan vandaag al beginnen. Slimme technieken, baanbrekende oplossingen, die hebben namelijk 1 overeenkomst. Ze beginnen allemaal met een goed idee. En die ideeën ontstaan al vaak tijdens je studietijd. Dus mijn oproep, bewaar ze niet voor na je bul, maar doe nu al iets briljants met je ingeving. En Nyenrode University, ik zou u willen oproepen, creëer een klimaat van verantwoord ondernemen en koester het. Studenten met talent, en dat zijn jullie, daar ga ik vanuit, kunnen de leiders van de toekomst worden. Een mooie en verantwoordelijke rol. En die rol die kan je vandaag op dag 1 van een nieuw academisch jaar meteen pakken. Ik hoop dat jullie nu als student en straks als professional of ondernemer ons willen helpen om deze bedrijvige, slimme en innoverende regio tot de allergezondste regio van de wereld te maken. En onze kennis en onze kunde te verspreiden over de rest van de wereld. Om dat te bereiken hebben we ook jullie talent nodig. Dus doe vooral mee. Want wie wil er nou niet werken en ondernemen in de gezondste regio ter wereld? Ik vind dat een mooie toekomstdroom die vandaag al begint. Dat staat in de sterren van dit immense universum geschreven. Ik wens jullie allemaal een heel mooi studiejaar toe.
Thank you, Ms. Dijksma, for your inspiring speech. Roberto's Kulp began in 1861 as a tent farmer on 1 hectare of land in Breukelen along the river Vecht. 5 Sculp generations have grown up as fruit owners since, on the same land and along the same river. In 1995, Roberto's Kulp decided to focus on making juice in addition to growing fruit. A good choice, because since that year, Sculps make the pure and naturally cloudy juice you know from them. This company shows that family business thrive and make an important contribution to our nation's economy. May I have your attention for Professor Dr. Roberto Flören, RSM Chair Family Businesses and Business Transfer. And may I introduce you to Professor Dr. Marta Berent-Braun van Lanschot Kempen Chair in Family Businesses and Ownership Dynamics.
Dear members of the Foundation Board, dear former and current Nyenrode board members, dear students, faculty, staff, alumni, and friends of Nyenrode. In 1992, Nyenrode started its family business research program. And first, I will give you an overview of the research of the past 30 years. Then, Marta will present the results of our latest study on family business and sustainability, and she will also give the research plans for the next 30 years. We are thankful of the time, Rector, that you gave us, 8 minutes.
Lucky you.
Yeah, lucky me. So I will present the research results of the past 30 years in the next 4 minutes. Yeah? When we started, family businesses weren't that popular. Actually, they were deemed unprofessional, too much emotions, full of intrigues, and actually only fit for television. And there were great series, I have to say. And frankly, our students didn't want to work at the family businesses either. Although 1/3 of our alumni owns a family business or is a CEO in a family business, they didn't want to work there. They want to become a trainee at the multinational firms like Axo, Unilever, Shell, or at one of our large banks we had in that time. Anyhow, we still started. And the first research results, they were, had a great impact also. We didn't measure it by then. It wasn't television, it wasn't on newspapers, but the main source of impact measurement at that time was, do I hit teletext or not? We did. And now, luckily, thanks for Bo van der Rey and others, we have their impact cases. So now we may have improved our system, but teletext, that was a big thing. When we started, we were the first in the Netherlands, so there wasn't any definition of family business. So we came up with our own, and luckily that definition is still used. I never show it anymore, but now I thought I would show it. It's about the dynamics between family, business, and ownership. And what I'm most proud of is that we were able in those 30 years to break some myths. Because people say, oh, you're doing family business. Oh, I know those family businesses. Those are those small businesses, which is true. There are many small businesses that are a family business. But there are also large family businesses. And here's a list of the largest family businesses in the Netherlands. And you can't say that 85,000 employees is SME. So family business is studying something else than just SMEs. Another myth was that family businesses, that's from shirt sleeve to shirt sleeve in 2 or 3 generations. So the first generation builds the company, the second generation grows the company, and the third squanders the wealth. And I'm a 3rd generation family business member that doesn't exist anymore, so it always hurt. So that's why we made a list of the oldest family businesses in the Netherlands. And the oldest we found was from 1545, Oudewater, a ropery. But the sad news is they just left our list because the brother and sisters who were owner of that business, 14 generations, didn't have any children. So they had to sell, so that can still happen. But so they survived for a long time. And they also were saying, well, financially they might not be viable. Well, we broke that myth as well. Family businesses in the long run are more successful than non-family businesses. And not just in the Netherlands, that's worldwide. And it might surprise you, but a long-term perspective helps the business. Huh? We didn't do that just by ourselves. It was a joint effort. And we're glad and thankful for all of you, because at least 45 faculty members and staff of Nyenrode contributed to our research programs and to all our programs. That's one thing. Then we had the PhDs. They contributed as well, and we're proud to say that 4 of our PhDs have become a full professor either at the university or at the University of Applied Sciences. And then executive education. The cooperation with executive education has been very successful, and we're thankful for that. Not just in the governance programs, but we have dedicated programs for family business owners and their successors. And together with Ronald Heijn and Koen Lamp, we're developing that. And I would urge every faculty member to join up with executive education and the other way around to make it a more success. Now with the new transfer system, that might be even more possible. And then we have our business partners. From the very start, we had business partners who helped us with our research. And currently, we're working together with RSM, Van Lanschot, Kempen, and NPM Capital. And they don't just provide funds, although funds for a private university are very welcome, of course. No, what they also do is they give us contacts in the business world, and they contribute to our research. So thank you for that as well. Then, something I'm also proud of, is we hosted the main academic conference on family business there, here at Nyenrode, which was a huge effort. And there you maybe see a young Roberto, but you also already see a very young Marta. She was a PhD student at that moment. And that brings me to the final topic I would like to discuss, and that's succession. You can't talk about family business without talking about succession. And we proved that succession is more than maximizing shareholder wealth. It's more than an equation between ability to pay and willingness to pay. It's more than Excel sheet. It has to do about social emotional wealth. It has to do about the dynamics between family, business, and ownership. So that's something that we're still working on also in our executive programs. And as a professor of family business and business transfer, I also have to think about my own succession, of course. And as you see, I'm not retiring yet. But I'm very proud and also thankful of the board that they were willing to have a second chair in family business at Nyenrode already, and that chair is filled by Marta Berent. Marta?
Thank you, Roberto. Leadership, entrepreneurship, and stewardship are the values of Nyenrode. And the topic of this opening of academic year is responsible entrepreneurship in next 75 years. For this reason, I would like to share with you the results of our study on sustainability in family businesses, passion and urgency. Why to study sustainability in family business? Because this topic is so relevant for them. They are oriented towards stewardship. They are committed to continuity across generations. And also this research, as Roberto mentioned, is a joint effort with our colleagues from faculty and our business partners from RSM. Our first results show that actually sustainability is a very important topic for Dutch businesses. 90% of our respondents mentioned that they are strive for high ethical standards. And in more than 75% of the businesses, sustainability is incorporated in business operations. But we wanted to have a bit more fine-grained picture about the sustainability, as it is very, very broad topic. And we actually divided this into 4 topics: in economic, environmental, social, and good governance. And actually, we haven't noticed any differences between family businesses and non-family businesses when it comes to the importance of those topics for them. And as the aim of this research was actually to investigate the performance of family businesses on those elements and those aspects, and indicate how they can learn from each other, we created so-called sustainability index, where we compared family businesses that were very advanced in sustainability, so-called front runners, from those who were laggards. So they scored really, really low on those 4 dimensions. And then the question was, what are the drivers and what are the barriers to sustainability in those two different groups? And here you can see some of the drivers, and if you look really carefully and closely to this graph, you can see that the front runners really do it from the passion, from their inner motivation, because of the care about future generations, specific family values, but also feeling connection to a local community. Then when we move to the barriers, we can see no differences between front runners and the laggards. And actually those businesses who lag behind with sustainability, they mention that they have lack of knowledge about sustainability, but also the lack of power to innovate. And then we also look at the owners. Because owners in family businesses can be regarded as dominant coalition. Their values and norms and goals influence business behavior. So we look at those norms and values where the owners are striving for. And here again, we saw a lot of differences, actually at all of them. So owners of those front runners amongst family businesses, they feel social responsibility, they have willingness to give something back to society, for example. And this actually brings me to the next 30 years of research on family businesses at Nyenrode. Past research focused actually more on those differences between family and non-family businesses, but we actually found it not so much interesting anymore, we know that. And now we want to really look into the dynamics of family business. We want to understand the differences within family business. What is the heterogeneity of family businesses? In our research, we hope and we plan to focus on 3 areas, which is the governance, the private wealth, and ownership dynamics. We really want to understand the content of those dynamics, and also on the other hand, how those dynamics are influencing business itself, but also society at large. And here you can see also some of the research questions that we would like to pose in the future. So we are looking very much forward to the next 30 years of research in family business at Nyenrode, together with our colleagues from faculty, our students, and our business partners. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Flören and Professor Berent-Braun. I'm standing at the Brooklyn Bridge. Every American wants to have his picture taken on this characteristic drawbridge in Breukelen. This fascination with this bridge has historical roots. When Dutch immigrants decided to try their luck in the New World, the Americans in the 17th century, they founded settlements with named after their hometowns. The names of Amsterdam, Vlissingen, Haarlem and Breukelen nowadays still echo in the names of New York City neighborhoods. New Amsterdam is now called New York. Haarlem has changed into Haarlem, Vlissingen into Flushing, and Breukelen is nowadays called Brooklyn. Brooklyn's Dutch roots are also visible in its motto, Eendracht maakt macht. Unity makes strength. Our next speaker also traveled to this new world. May I have your attention for Mr. Andy Bender, Chair of the Netherlands America Foundation and Nyenrode alumnus.
Hello everyone, my name is Andy Bender and I'm a 1983 BBA entrepreneur and investor. Koen Becking has asked me to provide a presentation on socially responsible entrepreneurship. I'm going to give examples as how socially responsible entrepreneurship can benefit a business and how Nyenrode, as a Dutch institution, is in a unique position to attract and develop a group of future socially responsible entrepreneurs. To make my argument, I want to start by using an example of a business I started in 2001. The business is named Polaris. When I started Polaris, I chose for a business concept that improved the ethics in the pharmaceutical industry. Let's talk about what I mean by this. Well, pharma companies rely heavily on research of physicians conducted for the development of new drugs and therapies. Interactions between pharma and physicians are important to the innovation of new drugs. However, the problem is that in the United States, healthcare is twice as expensive compared to the average OECD country. The US government believed that this was because pharmaceutical companies were overpaying physicians for the research they conducted. So the US government started prosecuting companies for unethical behavior. And this enforcement resulted in that pharma companies paid more than $40 billion in fines between 2001 and 2019. As you might understand, the impact of these fines created a knee-jerk reaction in the industry. Pharma companies drastically reduced their interactions with physicians, and this was not to the benefit of patients. To address this issue, I started Polaris with the goal of letting pharma companies interact in an ethical and compliant manner with physicians while improving their bottom line and competitive positioning. As a first step, I developed processes that allowed for transparent, ethical, and compliant interactions between the companies and the physicians. Next, I had to turn these new regulations into something that would benefit the pharma companies. I addressed this by automating the processes, allowing pharma companies to improve their bottom line. The automation had a lot of additional benefits. Not only did it make the companies more efficient, it also provided data and insights that improved their competitive positioning. In addition, the data collected provided transparency, allowing insight into their own business practices. I quickly learned that addressing ethics did not only benefit my clients, but it also benefited my own business. For example, Polaris was a small business in a very competitive New York City business environment. Staff was constantly being recruited by competitors like Google and LinkedIn, offering more pay. I quickly learned that retaining them required more than just paying them a fair salary. The Millennial and Generation Z candidates I was hiring at the time tended to be attracted by businesses that were socially responsible. Beyond getting a fair pay, Polaris gave the staff a purpose by selling ethics, fixing a societal problem, and giving them a purpose. All of this had a very positive impact on retention, the quality of our output, making our clients happy, and growing our business. Selling ethics became a profitable business. As other countries started prosecuting pharma companies for similar practices, Polaris started offering its services across the world. And between 2001 and 2019, I grew Polaris into a successful and profitable software as a services business on 3 continents with 12 offices and a staff of 3,000. Now switching, how do these lessons learned benefit Nyenrode? Well, Nyenrode has an important role in preparing the future generation of business leaders who can balance social challenges with running a profitable business. Looking to the future with the environmental challenges in combination with increasing competition for top talent, we need managers who not only understand how to build and manage a business profitably, but also to address societal challenges. There's a tremendous opportunity here and a serious lack of business leaders who understand addressing these social challenges in a business setting. For example, addressing social challenges in a business environment requires cooperation with governments and employees. Since the early foundation of the waterschappen in the medieval ages, the Dutch have developed expertise, including government and employees, in business decision-making processes. In addition, the Netherlands is a frontrunner in addressing food production, fighting water, other environmental challenges. Initiating the development of joint educational programs with other Dutch institutions covering water and food, for example, will put Nyenrode in a unique leadership position. I believe that offering these hybrid programs while leveraging expertise from other Dutch institutions will be a unique differentiator for Nyenrode. Having come to the end of my speech, I would like to finish by thanking Koen Becking and his team for letting me speak at the opening of the academic year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bender. The Nyenrode Incubator reinforces our mission of serving society by shaping responsible leaders. We do this by creating a community of victorious Nyenrodians. Here, in the incubator at the Nyenrode campus in Amsterdam, we do believe in 3 values that have a positive impact on society. An innovative mindset, respect for the stakeholders, and responsible leadership. From the incubator, I would like to introduce you to Mr. Koen van Oranje, Special Envoy TechLeap.nl, and Jessica Peters-Hondelink, Director Customized Executive Education. Please, a warm welcome from Mr. Van Oranje and Ms. Peters onderling.
Thank you. I will start all over. It's an honor to welcome you at Nyenrode. So thank you for being here, and I am honored to be able to ask you some questions about social and responsible entrepreneurship.
My pleasure.
First of all, besides the fact that your grandfather opened the predecessor of Nyenrode, the NOEB, in 1946 as honorary chair, what is your connection to the values of Nyenrode leadership, entrepreneurship, and stewardship, and our mission to serve society by shaping responsible leaders and entrepreneurs?
Well, that's a long sentence. Well, my first connection would be actually my grandfather. So
Exactly.
He's very important for. Otherwise, without him, I wouldn't be here. Probably Nyenrode would be, but it would have a different form. Then my former boss used to be also your boss at Nelly Kroes at Nyenrode. So we share that. At least we know how it is to work for Nelly Kroes. Which was a great experience for me, at least. And then the values are something that we really also aspire to. I think it's super important to combine entrepreneurship with the impact it makes and with responsibility. And we see that, especially in tech, most of my activities are in tech. Companies are started because people want to do something differently and better. And if you want to do the same that's been done before, then you better don't start a business. Or you start a bar, because that concept has been working for a few thousand years.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we just heard Mayor Dijksma say that it all starts with a brilliant idea. But research has shown that usually not the brilliant idea, but a good team is a key success success factor for startups to survive. Well, this is why Mr. Koen Becking already said that we started a fund and a program to leverage and create successful startup teams. Well, you as a special envoy for TechLeap, what do you think about this new initiative?
Great initiative, and to the sentence, I must disagree with the mayor. I'm sorry, because there's many people with great ideas, and a great idea without a plan is hopeless. Is a lot of distraction, and so we see that's not just a good team, but it's the good team that actually makes the plan and executes on it. And I think in the end, it's a lot of hard work and sweat, and people forget that startups is all very sexy and cool, but it's pretty damn hard work, and especially to grow it from a small company into a really sizable company, and all of the transformation that requires, and the leadership as well. So I think a good idea is always really important, but the idea has to be executed well, and that's absolutely key. And so when this program supports you in finding your ideal co-founder, that shows, actually data shows that the co-founder and the founding team are super important. Exactly. And that you have to have complementary skills. You have to search for that, and that's not always easy, because people tend to want to work and collaborate with people that are very much like them, instead of understanding what your strengths and weaknesses are and finding complementary skills in your co-founders.
And if you see the recent challenges we face, societal, environmental, we have energy, climate crisis, war, social inequality, post-pandemic challenges, well, inflation, go on and on. How can, but
do we have
to start at a positive side, how can entrepreneurs and especially startups play a role in meeting these challenges? What are the chances here, the opportunities?
Well, I think you should maybe turn it around. Is if you have all these challenges, like how are you going to address them? So there are a number of actors in society that can. Obviously, governments can do a lot. But if you want to really innovate, the government is not going to innovate. They're not going, and the innovators in themselves and scientists are not going to turn that science or that innovation, that brilliant idea, into something concrete. Corporates might do that, but they typically have very optimized systems and find it hard to absorb innovations that disrupt their current business model, and so find it pretty hard to make transitions themselves. But driving them is even harder. So the startup typically is a vehicle to drive that change, and what we've seen now, also at the economy level, if you compare Europe to America in the last 10 years, is that the growth in the American economy, if you look at just at the stock exchange, has come from tech companies, all new companies that have tremendously grown in value, and that's something we have been lacking. So it's not only, so there are actually two elements here. One, the startup is no longer a small company that grows at a small pace. No, it's a high growth company that can actually make massive change in relatively short time. And it's the vehicle for bringing science to the market, and the science that would otherwise, and technology that otherwise wouldn't be picked up by existing companies or governments for that matter.
And what can corporates do in cooperation with startups? Because we have several very intelligent professors and lecturers here that teach us how those cooperations can take place. Like you can hire innovative people, or you can build an innovation department or strategy within your company, or you can just set it separately from your company and build it and let it grow there. What do you think about these forms of cooperation? Are these necessary? Are these successful? Do you have experience in that?
Well, I find it hard to say anything that the professors haven't already kind of spelled out. But no, I think it's very much a cultural thing within a corporate. If they facilitate innovation from the outside to be incorporated within their process. So it's something that has to be very deliberate, cannot be parked with the innovation department, has to be something that's inherent in the strategy and the culture of a company. Because what we see is often a CIO or the CEO thinks this is a very exciting thing. They set up a corporate incubator program or a corporate venture capital fund. But then the integration in the actual business units doesn't really happen. So something stays on the outside, and these companies don't really fail. And it's obvious, because if you have a 2 billion, revenue business, and then there's this little thing on the side that maybe does 4 or 5 million, how are you going to make sure that you invest in that it actually starts maybe competing with the big business? You basically don't. I mean, all the processes in the companies and the incentives are not supporting that. So it has to be really deliberate. Then, but another thing is spinning out of businesses, and we see in the area that we're talking about today, the kind of the deep tech companies that want to make real impact. For those to come out of a university and to grow is really, really difficult. You might see it in biotech, but you don't see it that much in Europe. You see it in Boston in some areas. But the real successful companies like ASML and NXP, they come out of corporates, and actually the concentration of talent in corporates, if that's facilitated, when technologies are developed that cannot be developed by the company themselves, so to have companies to understand that and spin those out and support them. That is really, really important also for a country, and we don't see enough of that. Even if you look into the details of the history of ASML and NXP, it's often a big struggle, and it's not a model that we have been developing like companies like Cisco and others.
And what is important for that collaboration to work?
Well, it's one from the top. There has to be really strong support, and it has to be embedded in the culture and the organization of the company. Very often, it will be seen as an annoyance, or it's nice, but once it starts growing and you need to allocate resources, the resources do not get allocated. So innovations like that don't actually get the kind of get to the kind of pace that you would get if you just actually spin it out of the company itself.
And we just talked about those challenges and opportunities in the world. How important is diversity?
Diversity is, it's a super important and very underestimated topic. I think what we see is that our companies, especially these high growth companies, when they hit the moment where they really start to scale, and if they don't have an inclusive culture, they will just not access the talent pools that they need to grow. And mostly people see this as a gender thing, or there's looking at people from different ethnic backgrounds. But in fact, it's also about being able to attract international talent. So if you don't have an inclusive company, you can imagine you're all white male engineering Dutch company, and you're speaking Dutch. Like how interesting is it for a very talented developer from India or from Silicon Valley or wherever to come and work in a company like that, and then to adjust that when you have 20 people working and you have a culture that's really starting to embed is much more difficult than starting upfront and building inclusiveness, which is more important than diversity, I think, but building inclusiveness in your culture.
Right. Great, thanks. And to dive deeper into the challenge of equality and diversity, it's more than gender, you said, but to go on with gender, research shows that startups with female funders have a bigger chance of surviving, but startups of male funders have bigger valuation and are more successful in gaining investment. So is the world of venture capital still too much a masculine environment?
Yeah, 100%, yeah. And surviving is not a good metric, I think, for a startup. You have to grow fast, and surviving, we see many companies survive that might be better off not surviving and returning their human capital to the market that can be used in a much more effective way. But no, it's absolutely, it's astonishing how the Dutch venture capital, and it's actually European, it's actually worldwide, but how it is still male dominated. And we did a whole program called Fundright, and we have been improving the situation. You see that there's an improvement in the number of women working and also being in decision-making positions in venture capital. So that's good, because we know that men invest in men. So if you have more women, you hope that they invest more also in women. Actually, and one funny metric is that the public funds have done a lot of efforts in getting more women on, as employees, but they invest mostly in men. Yes, so there's a dichotomy there. We don't really understand, but maybe it could be that we have more women in public investment funds, but that they or they're investing more in deep tech, where there are more men, or that because they're public, they're more risk averse, and it's seen as more risky to invest in women. So it could be that these public funds are actually, because they're risk averse, are investing more in men. But it's a complicated situation. And but one metric which I think is even more shocking, I think, is that about 83% of all investments are done in companies that are only led by men. So there's not even a woman on the founding team. So purely men, homogeneous teams, and that's, I think, for investors, it's also not good. So I think if you're an investor, look at teams that are more diverse. Look at companies that at this early stage are trying, very hard to get women on board, to get people from different backgrounds on board, and nurture that culture.
And you just mentioned Fundright. Could you tell us more about it and how it is performing?
Well, it's not performing very well. I think we're seeing that some of the front runners are doing well, and they're actually bringing the statistics up. Some of the others are saying, this is a hygiene factor, so you have to look at diversity, but you don't make it a priority. And others basically just say, we don't know what to do with it. What we do see is that the funds that are prioritizing this or are branding themselves, like Capital T is a fund run by two women, that actually they are finding a lot of good investment opportunities in that space, and they don't have difficulties finding them, whereas the all-male white funds do have difficulties. So there's something about a kind of a path dependency. If you have that culture, you are biased, and you maybe are not attracting the companies that you could otherwise attract.
And what still needs to be done to get more inclusivity and diversity?
I think success breeds success. I mean, so what we will be doing is actually we don't want to be the excuse for the sector not to be more diverse. So we have tried to bring them all into an international scheme called Diversity VC, and then praise, raise and praise, and maybe also we try to be more transparent about successes, but also performance, and that the laggards, you know, that we do actually flag them as well as not performing. And if you want, for instance, public subsidies, well, if you don't have a diversity policy in your fund, why would you then get a public investment? You know, you could do it in that way, and you could work with the LPs, the pension funds. You know, they could start to diversify away from those funds that are not inclusive.
Well, Nyenrode started off as a masculine environment as well. So Petri would tell us more about 50 years of women at Nyenrode. So it's very important to start with that. But what is the role of universities? You have many incubators, accelerators, alumni investment funds. And what are their roles in helping startups to contribute to the challenges?
What their role could be? Well, it's an environment where people are, the brightest people are thinking about solving really hard problems, and that's something that, you know, an entrepreneur also has to do. But there's a bit of a discrepancy between the culture of a university and the culture of entrepreneurs, and universities are maybe less risk-taking. They're established institutions, and also the people that are running them typically, they're not entrepreneurs. They don't have to be, and they shouldn't be, probably. But entrepreneurs need space, freedom, openness, and they need capital, and they don't need a university that kind of tries to how you say that, hugs them to death or hangs on to them because they they have got a little bit of IP, and they try to, in this big dream that one of those companies might become a €1 billion company, that they then have I don't know how many percent. So we're seeing that many of actually the universities are playing a good role in the early stages, but once the companies start to grow, they can be quite a drag as well on those companies, and we should really turn that around. I mean, the universities can be anchor points in ecosystems in cities that where you have campuses where corporates, startups, investors come together, but the university is just one of the players, and they provide one of the inputs or a few of the inputs, but they do not provide the entrepreneurship typically. And that's actually where a business school, a business university can actually play a very strong role, is that you're educating managers, you're educating entrepreneurs, and engineers typically, they're very good in building a product, but they're not always, or a chemist or a physician, not always that good in building a company. So the combination of the two is actually really strong. So what we're seeing now, for instance, in Delft and Rotterdam, I think is a very strong combination, which you can have here in Utrecht. With Nyenrode could potentially also be really strong. But Nyenrode is very well positioned, also close to Amsterdam, and Amsterdam maybe doesn't have a business school like you. So you are actually very well positioned in supporting that entrepreneurial drive behind those kind of scientific topics like biotech and others that are where University of Utrecht is very renowned for.
Yeah, so because we already have an incubator at Nyenrode
I don't know how much
Amsterdam.
time the rector has given us, but I'll just.
We're right on time.
Okay.
I know he's
I'm a bit embarrassed. You had 30 years and you could do it in 4 minutes. So, but I'm very grateful that you're giving me so much time for.
No, Lucien is taking care of the time. So we have an incubator here in Amsterdam. So also business universities have a great role. What can we do better and more to transfer knowledge and experience and connect people, funds and startups?
Well, what we see is that the best learning comes from other entrepreneurs that are a bit further than you, but or that have done it many times. So if you can actually bring repeat entrepreneurs in these programs, that's much more valuable than which textbook you can find. So it's that I think is really important. Striving for excellence. Many of the university incubators, and I don't know all the benchmarks, but in general, when they are publicly funded, they have no real incentives to come to incredible outcomes, because they just want to put as many of those companies in there, support these students, they like them, they cuddle them, but it's serious business. So if you want to build businesses that are actually performant in the market, you have to strive for excellence as well, and it means it's hard work, but it's also setting really high standards, and not just the kind of an easygoing program. So being tough and actually confronting the entrepreneurs with some of the really tough questions. Like we mentioned, the idea. Everybody has a great idea, yes. But talking about execution, talking about team formation, talking about understanding your market, product market fit, all those things, but really early on, and actually telling people this is not going to work. And or you actually have to put some money into this. So if you want to, you get good advice, you maybe have to actually get an advisor on board and actually pay for that. And so there are things that an incubator can do to really increase the quality of the entrepreneurs and support entrepreneurs. But you don't do that by cuddling them to death. You do that by giving them some really honest feedback.
So the students are here, so we're going to be more tough on you. So now you know. Just one last question, because our future responsible leaders and entrepreneurs are sitting here. What is your message to them? Do you have a personal message for our students?
Yeah, well, I guess that was one of the really good messages that we heard before. Is don't wait, start, and start. Start, fail. Understand if you are an entrepreneur or not. You can be a really good banker as well or consultant. Not everybody is an entrepreneur. But start, and that's the way you learn. You learn most, and know that there is now a very different situation than the time when this institution was built. There is a whole infrastructure that supports entrepreneurs. Starting a business is a true and interesting career choice. It's still maybe interesting to work for a bank, but it is starting a business really is or joining someone. If you're not that entrepreneur that starts a business, I'm not someone that starts a business. I'm much more at a strategic level. So if you know that from yourself, you can join another company at a phase where they might need your skills. But keep your eyes open for many of the interesting things that are happening in that space.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Van Oranje and Ms. Peters Hondelink, for this interview. The incubator community consists of many different startups that operate in a broad variety of sectors. May I have your attention for Mr. Lucien Burm, CEO of the Dutch Startup Association.
Hello. Like I said, I'm Lucien Burm. I'm the chairman of the Dutch Startup Association, which is basically a very small organization that looks a bit like the organization of Constantijn, of which he's special envoy, TechLeap, but we are a member organization. So the startups and scale-ups of the Netherlands are a member, and we try to represent them in all kinds of way and make sure that the community is great and that kind of thing. Constantijn already said a lot of things, so I'm able to keep it a bit more short. And unfortunately, Constantijn, I'm not going to ask you to leave, but you have to leave, right? So if we would all give a big hand to Constantijn, and he needs to go to do some other. Sorry.
Well, I tried to sneak out.
No. I want to do this publicly. Yeah. No, it's impossible to sneak out. Yeah. Thanks, Jan. Thanks. See you later. All right, so we're going to talk startups now. And before I go into my presentation, like I said, which will be shorter, I'm looking for Julien, somewhere in the room, in the back. There he is, startups, always in the back. So just to give you an idea, from the Startup Association and from my company 10X, we produce programs for startups, accelerators, that kind of thing, and investment funds. And Julien was one of the participants of an accelerator that we did earlier. So just to give you an idea on what that looks like, here's Julien. Julien, did you prepare a pitch, maybe?
I did, but my slides didn't come through, so I will just do it without slides.
All right. But this is typically startup life, right? Things change overnight. Sometimes it's fantastic, and sometimes you just have to stand up and take it. Can I introduce you to your pitch of this fantastic company that you have?
You can. Can everybody hear me when I don't use the microphone? Or else I probably do like this, and then like this, and then like this. We have to? Oh,
Keep
sorry.
it like this.
Hi everyone, greetings. I will walk around a little bit, so if that's disturbing, please let me know. I had some cool slides, which are not here at the moment, but it doesn't really matter. I was actually creating them, and like the typical startup pitch is like 8 to 15 slides with all kinds of cool statistics on them and how big the market will grow and what kind of hockey curves. I think you maybe saw them sometime. So when I was creating them, I also thought like, oh, let's downgrade it a bit, use 3 or 4 slides and just tell you a story, a personal story, which I will still do. So now I have your full attention. I had a rather unusual way of high school. I went from HAVO to VMBO, back to HAVO, failed, to the MBO, HBO, and then to the University of Amsterdam. And when I finally arrived on that place where I always wanted to be, so the University of Amsterdam, studying something which I actually liked, my brain broke down. So I couldn't read anymore. 2 or 3 sentences were tops, and then I forgot everything again. And that was because of some surgeries, narcotics, anesthesia, I should say. And that's the whole different story. And chemotherapy. And when I was at home, mostly laying in bed or on the sofa, trying to catch up a little bit with the study material I needed to do, after these 2 successful first courses I actually passed, which gave me a good feeling, I felt incredibly demotivated and frustrated and angry that I couldn't keep up with any information. So while I was laying, you got to picture me like in my sweating sweatpants like the whole day, trying to read something, not grasping anything and feeling horrible because of it. But that's also when I found out another way of learning, audio. So what I did was that I searched, I would say the entire internet, on audiobooks and podcasts that covered my topics I was studying. I was studying European history. It was rather like extensive. What I've also found out on that point in time was that although there was audio, there wasn't really something which made it time efficient. So the podcast, for example, were like 40 minutes, super boring. Who listens to podcasts over here? Well, that's good for the story. Like, it would have been awkward if I would like. Thank you for that. But so it solved the problem a little bit, and there were a lot of audiobooks to listen to, but it was super time extensive and rather boring. So then, after trying that to get back into university and not lose too much time, I actually got back to university when I felt well enough again, and I started studying. And then I looked around, like I don't know if you have a library on the campus, I reckon, right? Yeah. So I was at back then I was at the university library in Utrecht, and I looked around, and what I saw was all these people which I had conversations with in my spare time about the podcast we were listening to, were all sitting behind the same desks, looking at their laptops for 12 hours in a row the whole day. And so when they didn't have the exam period, they listened to audio to learn from, like they loved it for educational purposes. And then the exam period hit, and everybody sat inside in these chairs like this, staring at their screen, feeling horrible because of it, their brain exploding after a couple of hours, but everybody sat down because they needed to digest all the information. So then I spoke with everyone. I said, like, but you like audio, right? Like, why? So everybody said, like, no, there's no way to learn for your exam via audio. Then I started doing a lot of research. Again, Googled the whole internet, and didn't find anything. So that was the point I decided to build it myself. So how we started off was at the Applied Science University of Utrecht. Small pilot, 30 students, testing small fragments, 10 to 15 minutes, which explained exam topics in a fun way, but actually made sure that the brain remembered it via research. And then 29 of the 30 students said, this is great, this solves so many problems. I'm dyslexic, well, that was the most, like, goosebumps, I thought so. It's always the thing when I speak about that feedback thing, but it was a dyslexic person who said, this is the first time in my study history that I don't feel stupid. I finally have the chance to get along with the rest, and if my brain doesn't catch the information anymore and I see all those screens in the library flashing real quickly, everybody reading, I can just close my eyes and tune in. And well, there's one person who didn't want it, but he had a photographic memory, so we were like, okay, that's fair enough. So after all these reactions, we went to the University of Applied Science of Utrecht and said, like, this is solving so many problems. Please let us do this for more students. Let us help first years with their first exams. Let them not have all this stress which I needed to have, that we all needed to have. Let's put it on a much more normal way. studying. So that's what we did. So 800 first years of the University of Utrecht used it. But we thought we were onto something, since like the feedback mostly looked like propaganda. It's not a very nice word, but it looked like I was just behind my laptop typing it in, but it was such sweet messages coming in, so we thought like, oh, there might as well be something here. So we started off at the University of Amsterdam and launching it ourselves. So not in collaboration, but yeah, it goes much faster if you do it yourself as a startup. And then no one bought the product. No, I'm kidding. That was like 51% of the entire year bought it immediately, and we didn't need to do any promotion. They loved it. And the reaction stayed the same. So we thought, okay, we're onto something. We're solving such a huge problem for people over here. People feel better. They give us in their feedback that their mental and physical health is improving because they finally are not forced to sit inside the libraries. And then we thought, so how can we make this even bigger? Then we started creating a lot of content, a lot of people behind their laptops, a lot of developers creating an app. And we built it for 8 new universities. So at this point in time, 8 universities in the Netherlands were live. And next week we're launching in 4 new countries. So that's super exciting. So it was a little bit of how we actually started up as a business. Like we encountered a huge problem, like probably known to many of us. Lucien?
That's the 1 minute.
Ah, perfect. Very smooth. Like nice. No, but yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about the past and the present, what we're doing. We're also helping out companies such as Tesla to help let their employees learn more efficient to improve their mental and physical health while they're learning. And I think today, like in a beautiful room like this, the question for me to the audience would be, if you look around, and like there are a lot of students also here, like students who listen to podcasts. Can I see some hands? Perfect, thank you. I think as a university, it's interesting to ask yourself the question, do you think audio or a learning method like this will play a part or a bigger part in the future? As we look towards like the past 10 years, it has increased tremendously. 40% growth of the market every year, and students being the biggest users of that market. So the question I want to ask you is, if you want to be a part of that change or miss out. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. While you take a sip, we heard Constantijn tell you about the importance of teams and founders and co-founders, accelerators, etc. We're short on time, but can you say a few words on your experience in co-founderhood?
I'll do it really quickly. So I started off with a good friend of mine, actually. She joined the company from the beginning onwards. I told her already, and she was doing something at, what was the firm called again? I think Boston Consultancy Group. And she didn't really like it because she didn't really add any value, so she wanted to do something. Then she joined, and we hustled for 1 year, basically, against all odds, trying to build our product, trying to get funding in. And then when we were raising a new funding round, she fell away in the middle of the round due to personal reasons and the fact that it just wasn't the right time and the place for her to build a startup, which was, if you're fundraising and your co-founder quits, you're basically not fundraising anymore. It's super important, and I knew her for like 6 years, but working together is something different.
Yeah, and we noticed that, you were like sick for a week, remember? And then suddenly all the engines went on, right? You raised a round, hired people, and started growing. Great work, Julia. I have to cut you off now because I have to put a few slides on now. Thanks a lot, man. Julia.
Thank you.
Let's see what happens. Is this on? It's not on. Yeah. Right. Placeholder. All right. Gonna try to make it really short. A lot of things has already been said to you by Constantijn. I just want to explain you something about startups if I can. Does anybody recognize this picture? You can't say iceberg, that's not enough. Who said Titanic? Yeah, exactly, Walter. This is, they assume this is the iceberg that sank the Titanic, and apparently they can see it from some red paint that was underneath. So I'm trying to explain to you that startups are a bit like icebergs, and that may sound strange, but you know, startups they tend to sink Titanic companies, and it's not about what's above the water, but what's below the surface that actually kills them. Here goes. A few companies left our country the last few years. So Shell, Unilever, DSM, and these might be probably the companies as well where a lot of people who came out of university worked for. Well, I was just going to say, just want to put it up and say, is this a problem? Should we worry? And I'd say no, because there's the rise of the unicorn. Constance mentioned already a few. For us, these are the new large companies of the Netherlands. You might recognize a few. Of course, I think everybody knows Thuisbezorgd in the top left corner, Just Eat Takeaway. And you know that's a very large company. But for example, Adyen is lesser known. It's in finance, of course. It's but its value on the stock exchange is sort of all the traditional banks combined, right? And in one time during COVID, it was actually quite larger. So Bank is another bank. Backbase does things for bank, and I even included some companies that are now really big. They weren't unicorns at the time, but Booking and TomTom and Marktplaats. But they play quite a big role nowadays in our economy. So they just don't come into existence. There's something that is needed to get there. Before I get into that, this is what happened in the last few decades. So there are two things going on. One is the average survival rate for 5 years for big companies has been declining over decades. It's now near, or I guess it's even below 65%. And the funny thing, startups are actually increasing their average lifetime. So everybody knows in the past, if you're a startup, there's a chance of 1 out of 10 that you will survive. This is not true. There's probably 25% chance, so 1 out of 4. But you're gonna make it into 5 years, half the time, right? So that's roughly the same as large companies. That is kind of strange. So the iceberg, here we are. To get to those few unicorns, which is basically increasing in many nowadays, there's a whole bigger world below the surface that actually produces these kind of startups. Well, it's a funny word in our company. We like to call this a proto-economy. It's not the economy of today yet, but will be the economy of tomorrow. And that's what I'm trying to get at. So for every unicorn that you saw, you need 40 scale-ups. These are the companies that Constantine mentioned that are already doing really well. They scale up fast. And you need 40 of those companies to produce one of those that you just saw. To get to scale-ups, we need even more. So we need 6 startups to turn into a scale-up. That sounds interesting. That's doable, you would guess. Well, if you would live in the US or Israel, the chance is 1 out of 2. Right? So we have a way to go here. So in the Netherlands, there are about 12,000 startups now, slightly below, but we don't know exactly what's happening, right? In all the attics and student houses, what's actually going on is probably a lot more that we don't know. But these are registered, so that's a lot of companies. And when Constantine started, I would say with Nelly Kroes with Startup Delta and later TechLeap, also the origin of Dutch Startup Association is about 5 years ago. There was maybe 500 startups a year that was added each year. Nowadays it's about 3,000. That's an estimate. We don't know exactly, but it's increasing and it's by the thousands nowadays. So I was just thinking, what's going on there, right? So they're in the Netherlands, compared to the US, for example, there are not a lot of people who already had a career and then do a startup. It's mostly student business. So if you look at the students, it's about 500,000 in the Netherlands. In university and higher education. Every year there's about 100,000 graduating. So with 3,000 startups a year, that's about 10% of those. And that's interesting Because when we do research and we talk to students, we hear a lot of things going on. There's a lot of entrepreneurship. Right? It could be a dabbling in crypto trading a bit, or they have set up a web shop, and it happens everywhere. But we also heard lately that you're not so cool if you don't have a startup. And we hear that often and more often. So that's very interesting. Startup is apparently so democratized and so based in methodology that almost everyone can do it who has a little bit of entrepreneurship in him. In her. So there's definitely room for growth. But we also hear a lot of stuff is failing. So if at the end 75% fails after 10 years, that is almost 67% of them, so half of all startups, that actually fail of problems between founders. So you probably, maybe you live in a student house or here on campus, you have a great click with somebody and you set up a company. The chance of that succeeding is very, very low because you're not stress tested. So Julien had the same story. Once you get stress tested, all your friendships sort of fall apart and there's no company anymore. And that it's better to do that in sort of in advance of everything, or there will be investments in your company and it becomes really difficult to sort of get not entangled anymore. So in the Netherlands, it's mostly nobody has experience in having set up several companies. So you're the first-time founder. You're doing it for the first time. So there's a lot of risk involved. So that's one problem, right? So founder problems and you're being a first-time founder. Then the second problem. This looks rather positive, right? So these are the investments in startups in the last few years. Ignore the last one because that's this year, but we're doing well already. It's skyrocketing, right? It's been record after record each year. That's a lot of money. So you would think that's great, but these are mostly the unicorns that you've just seen. The truth for you people who want to start a company is this: it's declining. So on the one hand, we have more and more people who want to found a startup. And there's less and less people who want to fund a startup. That's a gap that needs to be solved. So here we are at Nyenrode, and we're going to try to solve this problem. Everyone is going to do their bit, but Nyenrode is going to certainly do their bit in a combination of a program, a fund, and research. Right? It's called Spirit of Enterprise. We just kicked it off. And the goal is to produce the best teams with the best founders producing the best startups. It's that easy. So involved, of course, Nyenrode. The alumni are involved. I will talk about later. The incubator in Amsterdam, Nyenrode Amsterdam is involved, and some other partners, and I will address them later. In short, because I promised to keep it a bit short, it's a 12-week program, and in the end, just a few startups will survive. So we're going to simulate basically the market, right? So you're going to start up with 100 people and maybe 10 to 15 people will actually launch a company. If you're one of those lucky ones, we'll have investment ready to make sure that these new companies are well funded and do not have those difficulties in these early stages to get funding, right? Because that's the big funding gap that's happening at the moment. We're going to start this month. Important to know. And the focus in the beginning is first personal development. Then we're going to look into team development and stress your team. And then once the team is set and good, then you get a chance to actually build a startup. And if you make it to the end, there's actually an investment waiting, right? So there's a heavy selection process, and the quality is quite high. But the opportunity is great. So that fund needs to be about 10 to 25 million in size. Like Koen in the beginning said, that should result in at least 50 startups in the next 5 years. It could well be near to 150 if we do it well. That's all up to you. One small part, but very important, is researching that venture capital space. I was talking about that funding gap, right? There's some things going on. There, the level of what we call seed funds, so the ones that invest in early stage companies, it's growing in the US at the moment. There's like more and more funds coming in, and the Netherlands is sort of lagging behind. So we need to do research. What is going on? Why do those venture capital companies Why are they not expanding? Why are there not more funds? How are they performing, and can they do better? We did a seminar earlier this year on Nyenrode, and among the VCs themselves, they actually accept the fact that we need to do stuff. We need to be more competitive internationally. So we're going to combine some research, education, training, together with the program and the fund to create the most successful ecosystem in the Netherlands available. Well, if you have questions later on, and I hope some students have questions later on, and not during the program, of course, there are a few people in the room you can ask questions to. There's Johan over there. Raise your hand, please. Jasper is somewhere in the back, handling the camera. And of course, Job is aanwezig. There he is, yeah, to ask questions. Carlijn over there, Nyenrode Amsterdam is here. Please have, if you have any question about this program, fund, or research, do come up to us and talk, okay? Then, as Julian also did, a starter pitch always ends with a question, right? You ask the audience for something. So normally we would say, if you want to apply, do come over and apply, and then we're going to select, like if you're really good, and maybe we'll let you in. But a far better way, research shows, is to have people nominate other people. So the question here would be, if you know anyone who you think of, like, well, that person got the startup potential, please send them to spiritofenterprise.nl, and we'll take care of them. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Burm, for your inspiring presentation. The past year has been an eventful year and marked the 75th anniversary of Nyenrode Business University. For the first 25 years, it was a men's stronghold. However, since 1972, women are also welcome to pursue their education. From the Dameskamer in the castle, I would like to ask you for a warm welcome from Ms. Petri Hofsté, Chair of Nyenrode's Foundation Board.
Very appropriate from the Dameskamer, where we just had a meeting today as well. Dear students, faculty, staff, alumni, friends of Nyenrode, dear former and present board members, dear mayor of the gemeente Stichtse Vecht, and dear ambassador of the Ukraine, I fully realize that I'm between you and drinks, and I just had a little bit of water. But I hope you bear with me and allow me a few closing remarks on this inspirational opening of the academic year. And it is inspirational because of the distinguished speakers. Thank you very much for that. At the beginning of the ceremony, Rector Koen Becking addressed Nyenrode's anniversary, and in particular, the opening ceremony has been devoted to not looking back, but looking forward to how Nyenrode can and will support responsible entrepreneurship in the next 75 years. And there are many challenges and a lot to do, as you've heard. And now that we have come to the closing of today's event, I would like to reflect on another memorable milestone, and you already mentioned it. A milestone in our history that is close to my heart, diversity and inclusion. And why was today's ceremony so inspirational and so innovative and gave new insights? Because of the fact that there was a diversity of speakers, a diversity of topics in between the whole topic of responsible entrepreneurships, and it was brought, as I said, by a variety of people, and we were, as an audience, inclusive listeners to what was being brought to our attention. So diversity and inclusion basically shown here this afternoon, how important. And it's fair to say that Nyenrode was the picture-perfect example of a men's world 75 years ago when it was founded. The era of the NOEB, it was a so-called male doe-jongens culture. And that resulted, 25 years later, in protest against the exclusion of female students with iconic and historic scenes, such as the protest of the women's movement Dolomina on the Castle Bridge. And that resulted in 72, indeed, of a first year in which women entered Nyenrode. From that moment on, the beginning of the 70s, women began to find their way towards Nyenrode. And now, as I'm standing here, the period in time in which women are a firm part of Nyenrode is already now twice as long as the period in time at which they weren't a firm part of Nyenrode. So much has changed. Now, 34% in total of the students are female. However, there's quite a variety between the various academic programs, and there are many programs where it's 50-50 or even more. 35% of faculty is female, 50% of management is female, and with Nelly Kroes, we already mentioned, we had in the period 1991 to 2000 our first female president of Nyenrode University, and interestingly enough, today all of the chairs of the students' associations, as well as of the alumni association, VSV, are female. And as a side note, I noted that you had male successors in your slides, in your pictures of family businesses, but I looked at the names mentioned there, and there are at least 3 big family businesses who I know have now female successors who are heading the family businesses and will bring them forward into the next century. So very happy to see that also the succession at Nyenrode in entrepreneurship, research and education is well looked after. So I mentioned a number of good figures, good percentages. However, the pace of change has certainly been a gradual one, rather than a revolutionary in the past years. Only this academic year, we have our first female vice Rector Magnificus in the university board. And only since last year, since 2 years now, I'm happy to be the chair of the supervisory board, being the foundation board of Nyenrode, also first time in history. So to commemorate the historic moment in 1972 when the first female students came through the Poortgebouw, Nyenrode is publishing a series of interviews on the website this summer and going into the autumn. A series in which today's female students are portrayed together with women from those early days. And these portraits show us the many things that have changed over the past 50 years. Take, for example, Ans. She studied at Nyenrode 49 years ago, and that studying was not expected of her, but not of any female at that moment in time. Marriage and doing a practical study, a little bit of a practical study in order to ensure that that could all happen was what was expected. The campus life in combination with the broad study scope was what had attracted her to Nyenrode. Also Jonneke, another example, also a student 49 years ago. She started with Ans with only 10% of female students among the total percentage. And they had questions about what about housing, what about showering, and how to behave ourselves. The answers to that came from the spiritual leaders at Nyenrode, the pastors and the vicars, interestingly enough. And Margaret remembered vividly the social education that she received in the bar, the famous kelderbar. When I myself was a student in the end of 70s, early 80s, the presence of women at Nyenrode was accepted as normal. However, we were still relatively few. I think I recall about 15%, so grown, but not very quick. And I recognize many of the stories that the earlier female students have told in the interviews. Today's students, such as Rika and Charlotte and René, who were interviewed, experience a very different world, with in many of our educational program a male to female ratio, as I had also already said, closer to 50-50. And they are still, and that's interesting, still attracted to educational environments where academic and student and campus life are intertwined, and where life-changing experience opens the door to the world. Nyenrode highly values diversity, equality and inclusion, as our rector already mentioned. And we take this further than only the recruitment of students. We also apply these principles to career opportunities, employees, faculty members and management. And that's why I'm proud that the university has signed the SER Diversity Charter last June, and it shows our commitment to this topic. Diversity and inclusion are critical and critically necessary for Nyenrode and for society at large, has also already mentioned in the interview that we just heard with Constantijn van Oranje. Diversity in all aspects, not just gender, but also nationality, also ethnical and cultural backgrounds are critical. And why? Why are they critical? And then I come back to the opening words of Koen. The world is at a tipping point of transformation, following continuing financial crisis up to today and even continuing into the coming period we fear. A war in Europe for the first time in 75 years, climate and biodiversity crises, continuing discrimination and aggression against women, children, and people with other cultural backgrounds and other minorities. Millions of refugees and a lack of trust in political and other leaders of being able to have a vision and being able to address all of these crises. So why diversity and inclusion? We need responsible leaders. And responsible leaders can only be inclusive leaders that embrace the capabilities and capacities that diversity can bring to create the necessary analytical, creative and innovative power to find sustainable solutions for the world in transition. Diverse and inclusive companies perform better. We already heard it today. According to various studies, not just in startups, in entrepreneurial businesses, but at large. A study of McKinsey has shown us. So Nyenrode has a role to play here in this transformation to a more sustainable world, and has a role to play to include diversity and inclusion in that transformation through research and education of those responsible leaders and entrepreneurs. It is also important that everybody at Nyenrode feels at home and that we keep improving the reflection of our world's population in terms of gender and cultural backgrounds in our organization and in our student population. Not only will this help us utilize all the talent we have available, it will also teach our students how to manage diversity that they will surely encounter during their professional life. And what is probably most important, it enables us as Nyenrode to contribute to an inclusive business community, providing opportunities for everyone, including at the top. Our work at Nyenrode is far from done. The vision and the aspiration for the coming years, moving towards the next 75 years, they are clear, including the aspirations for diversity and inclusion. We are taking the right steps. Diversity and inclusion is wonderful and it's a necessary goal to keep working on, and it's critical in the transformative era we find ourselves in. This we can only do together with all of our stakeholders, who I gladly, invite to cooperate with us in the coming years on empirical research and transformative education for responsible and inclusive leaders. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Petri Hofsté. Ladies and gentlemen, this completes the ceremonial part of this opening of the academic year. Thank you all for joining and listening. I would like to invite you for drinks in the Nelly Cruise Hall. And when you leave the visor, you can receive the book of Roberto Flören. Please stay in your place until the procession has left. Please raise for the procession.